Today, I am with Lori Pennington-Gray from the University of Florida. Do you want to just introduce yourself and tell us what you do up there? You'll do a better job than me on that.
Sure. My name is Lori Pennington-Gray, and I'm a professor in the Department of Tourism, Hospitality, and Event Management at the University of Florida. And I'm also the director of an initiative called the Tourism Crisis Management Initiative.
Okay, so I was really excited when I discovered you, so to speak. I just recently moved to Florida. I live in Orlando. I was reading the New York Times last week, and bam, there was this outstanding article on the whole nine yards of what's going on. Can you just talk to us a little bit about what that looks like and what you wrote about in your research and all of your findings and your whole life? So, okay.
Well, the Tourism Crisis Management Initiative has been around since 2007, and our primary objective is to collect research and make it useful to the industry. So even before this COVID-19 virus, we were working with the industry and using data to drive decision-making and management decisions. Primarily, we have three areas that we focus on. So we're looking at communications as one area, big data and social media kind of clustered together as another area. And then the third area is management, and what I mean by that is a lot of preparedness.
Okay.
And what you can do to prepare for a crisis in a destination.
Okay, so let's just talk about Florida right out of the chute. Okay, that's one thing. Since I'm a Florida resident, we have so many things happening here with Disney World and SeaWorld and Universal Studios. All of our big major employers are shut down right now. And we've got thousands of families across the country calling our agency saying, when are we going back to Disney? My own kids are, we're go pass holders. I mean, it just really impacts our communities. So let's talk about, first of all, the park situation, then let's talk about Florida, just tourism as a whole for a minute, what we can expect in the future.
Well, some of our newest research that we conducted was looking at different aspects of the tourism industry. And one of the big areas that we focused on is anxiety and anxiousness about travel. Okay. So using this, we asked questions about avoidance as well. So we really wanted to get an idea of, were there certain areas that people, once the restrictions have been lifted, would be more likely to avoid than others. We know from our 9/11 research that there was a little apprehension to going to areas where there were crowds. And we thought that that spilled over. We thought that that would be consistent. So a lot of the things that we included in the research were things that we knew from that research when we conducted it way back when. So we included things like the cruise lines, open areas like national parks, theme parks, big cities, small towns, stadiums, football stadiums, for example, in Florida is a big thing. So we include stadiums. So we had a whole host of things that we asked them if they were likely to avoid them. And the research as of Monday suggested that about 25% were going to avoid theme parks, and areas that, and amusement parks. So we're going to conduct this research again, but that actually bodes well. I'm thinking that, those numbers are not as catastrophic as what I thought they would be. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of conversations about pent-up demand for travel, and the research is suggesting also that people are looking at about 6 months out to start to travel again from when the restrictions are lifted.
6 months out for domestic or international? What are you seeing in terms of that?
For domestic, actually.
Okay.
So international is a little bit longer, and I think there's more anxiety around international. About 80% of who we've asked have said that they would wait over a year for international travel. So I think there's a difference in this international piece than domestically. We also were a little interested in this whole notion of drive tourism because, again, out of 9/11, we saw that people stayed closer to home and they were more likely to, engage in driving rather than flying. And so the research is fairly consistent with that as well. That we would like, that people are going to stay a little closer and they're going to drive to wherever they're interested in taking their trip.
Right. So if you just jumped on, I'm on with Lori Pennington-Gray. She's with the University of Florida, PhD. She's done tons of research, even during the crisis, to see what people's attitudes are going to be, what their personality, not what their personalities are going to be, but what personalities changing too, but what their trends are going to be in traveling, how people are going to feel about things. And we're just talking about anxiety right now, just even in the Florida market, of what's going to happen, just in our own area right here with the parks. I do have one question that just came across right now. What was the average age of the people when you conducted these studies? So
we're looking at people across the U.S. population, so we've weighted it based on the U.S. population.
Okay, so the U.S. population. So tell me a little bit more about what you're finding. Obviously, we know travel anxiety is huge. I mean, I don't even know if we need to poll people to figure that piece out. But what were you finding? Like, what will make or break something? You had some research that showed, like, not a lot of people are going to wait for the president to tell them, but more healthcare providers and so forth. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, that's great. This is an interesting finding. Again, this really stemmed from some research out of Katrina, and that different audiences responded differently to different sources when they were communicating the message. So again, we really wanted to let the industry know that if they had different people providing the message, that they would have different levels of trust with the provider of the message, and people would be more likely to engage in a predictive behavior that we were asking them to engage in. So if that's evacuating, or if that's wearing a face mask, or sheltering in place, all of these things are personal protection behaviors that we've asked them to participate in. So again, we wanted to understand in the research, who are the likely trusted sources. And so, obviously from what I've posted, you can see that Dr. Fauci rises to the top, along with our healthcare professionals. And I think this is another opportunity for the tourism industry to start to, work together with these other agencies.
Okay.
And in crisis management, we know that this has been the case for a long time, that it's intersectoral, and we have to have these partnerships in place. And those destinations and those industries that have, started to partner together outside of the traditional businesses in tourism are able to respond better. So we know that, if we can create these partnerships with our local health professionals, and then collectively together put the message out, then we're going to have better responses to that in the long term.
What are people going to be, and I could answer this myself from my own point of view as a professional in the industry, but is it going to be scary for people to get on that plane or that cruise ship? I mean, your data is showing that people are going to stick close to home. What are you finding there?
Yeah, I think, one of the things we also know is that there's a broad spectrum of types of travelers, and that not everybody responds the same way to risk, and that some people are, willing to accept risk and others are not. And so I think there's going to be different markets that are more willing to kind of venture out.
Right.
And then there's going to be others that are going to, be more reluctant. And I think a lot of that is going to be tied to personal risk as well. So if, I have a risk of being infected and then my personal health is at risk, then I may be less likely to kind of venture out if the risk is high. Again, for the industry, I think it's important that, we do a really good job of communicating what we're doing specifically. And I think it goes beyond just saying, we're cleaning regularly. I think it's also going to take some creativity and start to think about the things across the different facets of the business that we're engaging in. So we've seen some things come out of the airlines at what they're going to do, maybe removing middle seats. This morning I saw that they were thinking about putting shields up between the different seats. They have a fogger in there that they've talked about. So
Those are
You
all
know,
I've dreamed about for years anyway. That did not take, that really didn't take a crisis, like just more space, more, breathing
right,
air, everything. Like, um,
exactly,
but guess what? That's going to come at a cost too, because
exactly, right.
we're going into a time period that there's going to be high inflation. We're going to see prices rise in the airline industry. A lot of my people are hitting me saying, "Hey, when's a good deal's coming? When's a good deal's?" And I'm thinking, uh, it might be for a minuscule moment to get people up and moving again, but I
Yeah.
think prices are going to be higher in tourism. I mean, have you done any research on that, or what's your thoughts on that, of the direction of just the economy of tourism?
No, I totally agree. I think that we're going to see increased prices as a result of, fewer travelers and then the shutdown in general.
Yeah.
Businesses are going to try and recoup some of those losses in some capacity. So, yeah, we haven't done research on that side. Our research has been more consumer based, but as far as looking at whether people are looking for the deals, one of the things we know is that, as if you remember Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and we've got safety at the bottom, we have to get past this, risk and the potential safety to be able to move to higher self-actualization. So we are going to have to make sure that, people are safe in the destination regardless of what the price is. And then when people are in the position and, they have discretionary income, then they're going to say, okay, now where do I spend my money? But if they feel like they aren't going to be taken care of, or that the risk doesn't outweigh the benefit, then they're not going to travel.
So in your research, you said that you saw or found that we're going to see a lot more of the dry vacation coming back, like the 1970s, 80s. Did, can you predict on destinations for that, and maybe what that means for Florida as any?
Well, we did ask, in the last few waves of the survey, what the top destinations were going to be by state. And Florida is always in the first, second, or third. I think it's second this wave. So
Trust me,
we
what
know,
was number one?
yeah, we want to be
But what was number one?
California.
Oh, California. Okay. And it seems so much harder hit than Florida, right?
And again, interestingly enough, that New York is also there. So, some of these, destinations that have been harder hit are still, in demand. So there's some loyalty to the destinations also. But Florida will do well. I think Florida has a lot of the types of opportunities that people will look for initially. Beaches came out to be the number one type of vacation
Right.
that people would look for. So, that bodes well for Florida.
Except we kind of got hammered on the media this weekend, but I was out at the
Yeah, right.
I
Yes.
was out at the beach even yesterday morning. I've been twice this weekend, and it wasn't near what I saw the photos to be, So
Yeah.
here's a question that came across from Dave Evertson in Italy, actually. With the airline industry demobilizing 70 to 80% of the flights, what do you think, this is moving at the same time, will be the airline strategy for redeployment of flights and cost? Will prices be higher, or will there be bargains?
I think it goes back to what, we just
Yeah.
said is that,
Mhm.
it maybe initially there'll be some discounting just to get people moving, but that we might see, an increase over time. But I think there's so many moving parts in that, and when destinations are opening up, and
Right.
demand, and how destinations are handling, the visitors that they want to attract. And I'm not sure it's a direct, impact. I think,
Mhm.
we probably, could do some more research on this, but I'm not sure I have the exact predictive globe that would tell me what that would look like.
You're the professional. We want the crystal ball coming from the University of Florida. Let's go back to Disney and the theme parks and everything. I mean, what is that going to take to get people back in the parks? I mean, from an academic standpoint and research, what are they going to need to do when everything, you're strapped on a ride, you're holding on to things, you're fingerprinting when you go in the park, you're wall to wall with 10,000 of your closest friends, and from countries all over the world. I mean, what is it going to look like to just open up the economy of tourism just in Orlando again?
Right. I mean, I think it's not specific to the theme parks. I think it's all facets of our business and making sure that we've engaged in the strategies and the techniques that we need to keep people safe. And it goes beyond just, an immediate response. I think this is also a long-term response and a commitment long-term to being more prepared for what that next crisis is going to look like. And I think more consumers, our latest wave again, we asked them, how likely is it that you would look at the policies that businesses are employing surrounding COVID-19? And the responses were very high, from, strongly agree to agree, it makes up the majority of responses. So the consumer themselves are starting to say, no, I'm going to kind of do some research, right? I might have limited funds. I might have, you know, um, choices that I would limit because of distance now. And I want to make sure that I'm safe. And so when I go through my decision making, I'm going to also factor in what specifically are you doing to keep me safe? And from the minute that I board, the plane or get in my car to the time I arrive back home again, how do I know that you are invested in me? Because I'm investing in you by going to
Right.
your specific, property.
What do you think? What do you see happening in America? Are we going to return to the, um, and national parks have been really hot anyway in terms of like, just big market tours.
Hmm.
Is that what America's going back to? Like we're all going to flock to the national parks and, or what do you see? I mean, I don't see myself getting in a car and driving to like, Hilton Head, where I'd still fly up there. I mean, I
Yeah,
want to. So, what are we seeing in terms of like? I mean, I'm all over the place with this question because I'm kind of the person that's saying like, oh, the minute Italy opens up, I'm headed there. Um,
right.
so, let's talk about behaviors first, since I'm all over the place, and then we'll come back to that. So,
So I think again, there's going to be different markets that are more willing to jump on a plane and go to Italy, and
and
there's going to be
so
other
who
markets.
markets are they? The young people, or are they just more the physically fit people, or are we going to see any seniors with discretionary money traveling?
Well, I think, demographics is only one way to look at what the markets are, so we can segment the markets by multiple different things, attitudes and behaviors, and it may be correlated with demographics as well. But, we see, very fit seniors that are willing to jump on a plane and go to Italy, just like we see, a youth market that might be more, um, wi- wanting to stay home and, kind of stay safe. So I wouldn't just use demographics as a way to understand the marketplace. I think it really comes down to people's, thinking them about their stated preferences and why and what and how. And so looking at who they are and trying to find them, yes, we can back into that as well, but it may not just be that it's a senior market, right? Or that it's, a youth market or, a family market. I think we also have to kind of understand the psychology of why they're making those decisions.
How are we going to spend our money? I feel like because we're going into an inflation state, um, my luxury travelers are going to have less discretionary income to spend with the stock market down. So back to my national park thing, is that going to mean that we're all just like running to the national parks now and to the coast? And, what does that do for local tourism? I mean, we can say
Right.
hooray on that, but, what's the impact of that? Mhm.
I mean, I think there's going to be opportunities across the board. I think we're just going to have different audiences that we're talking to.
Right.
And it's going to be really important that each individual destination and business, invest in research to understand who that willing market is. Um, so yeah, I think there's obviously some research that suggests that we're going to have more staycations, that people will stay at home and stay closer to home. We also see that there's, some interest in the parks and traveling to the parks, but I wouldn't say everybody's going to do that. Um, that there's still going to be interest and demand for the traditional types of vacation.
What type of mindset are you finding in your research, besides anxiety? What else are you finding? Um, when you're out polling people? I mean, what are the feelings through this? And it's interesting that you did it during COVID-19. Do you have anything compared to what it was 6 months ago, or like a different time frame, or I mean, do you always just poll during crisis, I guess?
Well, we operate, ongoing, but we didn't start this, specific stream of research until January 26th. So we don't have like back data from a year ago to, benchmark against. But I would say that, the goal of what the research is to look over time and to continue to do this so that we can see relative to the benchmark how things change, and then use it as, a way to understand how, U.S. travelers are responding to different types of crises. And, once COVID-19 has kind of settled down, there may be something else that kind of, you know, makes people a little bit more worried or fearful or anxious, and therefore we would be able to monitor that as well.
So,
But those are the kinds of variables also
yeah.
looking at fear and worry. And I think out of those three, people are somewhat worried, I think, and that may not be tied directly to just travel. It's also, you know, tied to things like I don't have as much personal discretionary income. What is the world going to look like? Is my favorite spot going to have different rules and regulations that, is going to change the way I vacation? So I think there's a lot of things going through people's minds, not specifically about, COVID-19 as well when
Yeah,
it
and
comes to.
I have to agree with that, because I feel like the questions that I get on a daily basis right now is, okay, when's Europe opening up? And then what's Europe going to look like when it opens up? Are you going to be able to cross borders? I mean, we just heard that that Spain might not open up tourism till 2021. They might be opening up their economy slowly, slowly, slowly. Same with Austria, but we're not letting hotels open. That's a really scary thought to me, to think like, oh my gosh, you can't go to Spain, because that is such a major point in Europe for tourism.
Yeah.
And that's going to change the landscape of how we do things in cruising, in vacationing, etc. So I think for myself, there is so much anxiety of like, I've had clients say like, I'm not going till there's a vaccine.
Right.
That could be years. I mean, so we're going to sit around for a vaccine. That's a hot topic on that. How are we going to test at the airport? There's been rumors here that Disney's going to do a temperature check when you come through the parks, and I think to myself, like, well, what if your kid has a high temperature? Just, not everybody has COVID and high temperature. Then
Right.
you paid $5,000 to come, and you're sitting back at your hotel. There's so many things that I think, how is this going to all work out? When you are being at the University of Florida, what do you think is going to be the major issue to look for in the future now with tourism? I mean, when you're sitting home right now, well, you're still in school, so you're not really sitting home. But like, what do you think is going to be the hot topic of the future that really needs to be looked at and studied in tourism?
As a academic, you mean my students in the classroom? One of the things that we've tried to convince the industry to do is to invest more heavily in crisis management,
Okay.
and to include that alongside with their strategic management planning, and really, take the time and think through the scenario building and, testing and conversations. And I think, we've started to see this because we see also that increase in the number of crises that, destinations in the industry are being faced with in general. This is kind of the big enchilada, but we definitely
really think about it like it's not just this. We have hurricanes going on, volcanoes blowing up, and I mean, this is one crisis. But if you look at a lot of destinations on a whole, I mean, on a daily basis, something's going on somewhere.
Yeah, even today, right? I mean, think about globally all the things that are happening, even just in the South,
Right.
with storms that are going through.
Tornadoes yesterday blowing through. Yeah,
Exactly.
I'm out
So
riding my bike on the beach yesterday morning, and someone yells out of their house, "Tornado in 5 minutes." And I'm like, did not get the memo. And within 3 minutes, that thing was like zipping through, and I barely packed up the bike and drove as fast as I could, you know? So I was thinking about that. I was like, whoa, all we don't need is a hurricane to hit Florida this year,
exactly.
Labor Day, like we do every year.
Right.
Going
And so
back,
maybe I think that's part of it is that I think we've been fairly unidimensional in when we plan as well. We plan for, a crisis. I think we also have to think about what happens if there's two or three that happen at once,
right.
and start to, integrate this into the way that we do business. Because I think, we have seen that people want to travel, and this is, life changing that people have to stay at home. And so the industry needs to come together and have those kinds of conversations. What is the bare minimum that we all are going to, commit to? And then what do these layers of, safety and preparedness look like, as we kind of move through this over the next year or so? Um, and it's not one person telling them what to do. I think it's a conversation that the industry has to have. And one of the things I think that could come out of this that I think would be beneficial is another organization that would be dedicated to this specifically in the tourism industry, where, they're not coming together for, marketing purposes. They're coming together for preparedness purposes. And what are the conversations and what technologies are being, invested in, and what's working in one destination versus another as far as testing and people's responses to that, not the testing itself, but what kind of, pushback are you getting, or what kind of acceptance are you getting? So I think there's lots of things that could happen if we had a collective voice that we could address some of these things with.
Mhm.
And so I would love to see that there's an international organization where this could happen.
Back to the economy of tourism for a minute. It goes both directions. It's not just us spending money in Italy. The Asia market's huge for the US,
Yes, it is.
and it's a European market. Um, just what do you think that's going to look like now? I mean,
Yeah, I mean, when things open up, I think it's going to be slow.
Mhm.
Not only from, you know, a wave of who's going to be coming, but also, the number of people. So again, it could bode well for us, right? We have the opportunity where we don't have a flood of people and we have to respond. We might have more of a phased approach where we can kind of work to make sure that things are working properly and that we can respond. I'm not sure which, countries are going to be the first ones to come back. I haven't done that research either, but regardless, I think, we need to be continuing to, invest in safety and then do the research with responses to how people are feeling when they go through the process.
In all of your research, what was your biggest surprise finding? Like, what was your aha moment in all of that? Mhm. Was there anything that you were like, oh my gosh?
Not really, because I think much of the research has been somewhat led by previous research.
Mhm.
So, the whole Dr. Fauci thing, I think that's fairly consistent with what we've seen in the past.
Mhm.
I think, you know, it's interesting because he does have such a high presence, and a positive response. But that doesn't surprise me. I think people look for strength in communicated messages, and he does that. So people are responding positively to.
So real
Uh,
quick, for those people that just tuned in, Lori's done a ton of research with, she's a PhD at the University of Florida. And part of the research was about the anxieties of traveling. It was about who do we trust when we listen to whether or not we're going to be traveling in the future. Dr. Fauci ran really high on the list of, like our new leader of tourism, I guess. If he says it's okay, then we're all okay. Um, who were the other people that were kind of on that list of people, that
Well, the only other person was the president, and then we looked at more organizations. So whether it was the healthcare professionals or the state travel office, the governor, but that would vary by state. So we didn't name one specifically. It
right.
wasn't a Florida specific study, so we just put the governor. The consular generals, so looking at international as well. Um, the State Department was on there, and they also had a fairly high rating as
Now, see,
well.
for me, the State Department is kind of the top dog for me. Like when I'm sending travelers out, I'm going to the State Department. If there's a level 3 or a level 4 warning, I'm constantly evaluating that. So
Mhm.
I would feel like that's more of a go-to for myself personally. So
It
is
was
it,
very high off in the at the beginning when we started surveying, but over time we've seen this shift to the medical professionals. So
thing
uh,
it's mhm.
I think it's consistent. Yeah.
Okay. We just have a few more minutes. Let's talk for a minute. The future of the industry, it's completely collapsed in terms of jobs, tourism, hospitality. Everybody knows somebody that works in tourism or hospitality, whether it's a Disney person, a Marriott person, a travel agent, an airline person. There
Mhm.
has been no industry hit harder. And maybe that's different now, but we initially out of the chute, even back in January, I was cruising on Royal Caribbean, having this dialogue one night at dinner going, this is going to be a disaster.
Mhm.
With no idea of what April
April. Yeah.
25th was going to look like. Now, nearly everyone I know in the tourism business is furloughed or unemployed.
Mhm.
80% of our hotels are shut down. Cruise lines are sitting with no goal in sight, suspension after suspension. Airlines are near bankruptcy. And we're seeing a lot of international airlines really take a hit right now.
Yeah.
Um, I talked to one of my suppliers down in Peru who said many of the travel agencies down there are bankrupt. The restaurants are bankrupt. I mean, they can't survive Machu Picchu. Without Machu Picchu,
Right.
tourism it sustains economies. So what is it going to take to put this all back together? If we've got anxiety and we're waiting for Dr. Fauci and everybody to give us the A-OK to travel, I mean, what's it going to take to put back an industry that really kind of runs the whole world? And I said that to my husband. I said, you take tourism out of the mix of countries, you're going to see
Yeah.
poverty, you're going to see starvation.
Yeah.
And it looks so much different on the islands than it does with me sitting in my house. I like social distancing in my own space. In food to table countries, it's really,
Mhm.
um, I mean, it's heartbreaking, really. I don't
It
think
is.
people understand how much world economies depend on tourism. Can you just comment on that really long question?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's devastating, and I think we've seen a lot closer to home, and and our research also has been pretty U.S. focused. But the things I read about developing countries and how it's going to be harder for them, I think we are resilient as an industry, but I think it's going to take more as well. And I think, as I mentioned already, I think we need to have a way to come together collectively and have these international organizations, lead the conversations on how we can do this. I'm not sure this can be piecemeal. I'm not sure that we will come out of this if everybody is left to do their own thing and figure it out. I think there has to be this global conversation where, people share information and, have a coordinated effort and really, band together so that we can start to address some of the, you know, concerns that different countries are going to have, things that we haven't even thought about yet. Um,
What's
you
your
know, there,
timeline in your mind? What's your timeline in your mind when we're going to start moving again?
you
Uh,
know, I, I think we'll see some slow trickling back in the next 6 months, but I think it's going to be over a year before we start to see, things operating as normal. and it won't be normal, right? It'll be, semi-normal.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, I think we're still about a year out, which gives time to be thoughtful, I think. And I think this is really an opportunity. I really do, where we can start to, do some of the things like crisis management has talked about for a long time, scenario building. If it doesn't unfold as we would have anticipated, then what if and how to. And so now's the time to start to have those conversations. And even when we're looking at, huge numbers of unemployed, I think people are committed to our industry, those that work in it.
Mhm.
Um, and I think some of the leaders are also in an opportunity to kind of bring people together and have these conversations. So I do feel positive about it. I do think it will look different.
Mhm.
Um, and I'm not sure that it'll look the same everywhere. And so as travelers, we're going to have to embrace these differences that different destinations feel is important for their country and community. And that's something that, as we looked in the past with, not expecting what I have in my backyard to be the norm, and that I think we have to have that conversation more frequently as well, so that people realize that this is community driven also, that it impacts everybody that lives there. So if they make certain, provisions because they're committed to a certain aspect of safety because that destination looks differently, then we as travelers, we need to be aware, and then two, follow the guidelines that they've put forth in that particular destination.
Okay, real quick, because we're going to wrap up with questions here. And I've got one from Carrie in California that says, is there a Lori professional at the table for these conversations at a national level? You're now getting promoted. She says, it's a great discussion, but how come they don't have, or is there and we don't know? Like, they brought in the airlines, they brought in, the cruise line, the CEOs. I mean, do we need somebody at the national level?
I think that's a great point. I think that one of the areas that, we've seen for the research is that I think as a society, we've also started to rely more heavily on science, and that we're seeing it every day in the news, right? Here is, the science behind, where we are, how many people have been infected, et cetera. So I think people are starting to question decisions that are made without science. And so, I mean, it's a great question, at the national level, do we have academics at the table that are using science to ask questions to help to, challenge some of the traditional thinking so that we can move the industry beyond?
Okay, on a personal note, what are you going to do? In, in terms of travel, I mean, like, where do you fit on the whole scale of this?
Well, one of the other things we've found is that if you have, more experience, that you're, more willing to take risk. And so I'm fortunate. I've traveled quite a bit and I've worked in a number of different countries. So my fear is not as great. Um,
So
you
that's an
know,
interesting point. So if you have more travel experience, then you're more inclined to take the risk.
I think the reason is because our self-efficacy goes up. So we know what to do and where to turn. And if something arises, we don't feel so, um, unsure about what to do. And so we know that self-efficacy is related to past travel experience. And so, yeah, I mean, that helps me to know. I think I told somebody in the past, you could drop me in any country in the world and I could find my way out,
Right.
right? I have the tools to be able to do that. Well, it's the same kind of situation. The more that we have experience, the more we feel like we can, adjust to whatever that new norm is. So I'm not concerned. I'll travel. I'm not sure if you asked me what my first trip was going to be. I haven't thought that far in advance yet.
Cannot take the wanderlust out of us.
Oh.
In late and didn't hear our discussion on Disney. They said they can't imagine that Disney will open in less than a year.
Oh, yeah, right. I think it's this big.
In your mind, I mean, I know you're not speaking for Disney, and
No.
but a lot of people are thinking they're going to open June 1st.
I agree. And I think what we've heard is that every company is starting to look at a phased opening, and they won't open full fledged and everything will be, fully open. They'll open pieces of it along the way. And so when I said it's going to be a year, I mean like back to fully operational the way, not maybe not exactly the way it was, but
In
you
my mind,
know,
I can imagine spending the type of money to come to Disney and then only getting a partial experience.
well, that's going to be a lot about communication also, and letting the buyer know, this is what we've done and this is how we're opening. And it's all about saying, the communication message. We're doing this to keep you safe and to keep our employees and our community safe. I think that has to be a lot about what this messaging is that it's about safety, and we're not doing it because we don't want you to have a good time, and that we're, not trying to give you the experience you want, but, we're going to commit to safety first so that you can come in and have a great experience and then come back.
Right. Let's talk really quick before we end the mass market cruises, because this really impacts Florida as a whole. We've got the Port of Miami, Tampa, Orlando, all sitting empty with people unemployed. How is mass market cruising going to return? Like, I think river cruising, I'm having no problem selling river cruising right now, which is interesting because that's one of my higher priced products. And that's all I've been selling through the crisis. Um, I don't have a lot of people right now, and I'm talking to Royal Caribbean on Friday live here. So 11 o'clock, you guys live here. There's so many experts that say that's going to be the last market to return. What do you think? I mean, it hurts our economy. It hurts all the islands' economy. That is such a difficult thing to just get on a ship now and just be with 5,000 of your closest friends. What's your thoughts on that whole, show?
Well, I do. Again, I think that it's going to be really important that, they communicate what they're doing, and then they are, invested in keeping people safe, and then tell people how they're doing that.
Right.
And so I agree. I think it's going to be the same. There'll be this phased, opening, and that some will open to certain destinations. They may go to more private islands rather than to some of the other islands. They may do shorter excursions. I mean, so it's going to look different until they can, again, figure out what it takes to keep people safe, and then to maximize that visitor experience so that that experience has got, high levels of satisfaction, so that people will come back. So it's like a science, right? It's like, how do we like balance these things out so that we ensure the safety, maximize the experience, and then hope that people stay committed and loyal and want to come back and do it again.
Okay, my final question for you is, and this is because I have a lot of followers who are younger, who want to work in the industry. You're an academic, you're training students to come out,
Yep.
right into hospitality.
Yep.
What is that? What does their future look like now? If you're considering working in, not my career, but maybe in a hotel career, or anything in the tourism industry. I mean, that could be tourist boards, the economics of it, the hospitality side. What are you saying to your students right now who feel like, oh, great, I picked a great major? No, I'm saying that to myself,
But it
great.
is a great major, and I mean, it's
What
a
I
fantastic
see.
industry. I think one of the things, being at a university, this is something that we have committed to, since the dawn of time. It's really about training people so that they've got skills that are transferable. And so I think that, one of the things we need to continue to tell our students is that, what you're doing right now is, something that is going to come back. And in the meantime, you also can use these skills to do other things. And so short term, there may be, if we've got a shutting down of the industry,
Right.
there may be a need for other types of things. I've seen like transitions to, blogging and, travel videos. And so some of the skills that we teach have to be transferable, so that when there is a crisis and business hasn't been impacted, that they can transition what they're doing into something that is um, similar, but that they can bounce back when things start to pick up again.
And I do
And
want to encourage people to continue to look at tourism as an industry.
so,
When I studied travel and tourism at Brigham Young University, and then received my bachelor or my master's there as well. A lot of people were like, oh, don't you just go to travel school for that or something? But the
right.
industry is so diverse and there's so many opportunities. And for myself, I feel like the industry, the whole industry, just not, I'm on the agency side, but has just opened the world to so many different things. I mean, now we run sustainable development trips in third world countries where we have a lot of projects going summer after summer on a
Mm.
nonprofit side. And that has really just changed my whole life, giving back through tourism. And so I want to encourage people that are out there thinking like, oh my gosh, the industry's dead, there's nothing for me in the future, to look up the University of Florida, look up what Lori's teaching there. Perfect opportunity, to now's the time to get educated, really. And think about what you're doing in the future for you younger viewers. Okay, final question. Will we have Gator football this fall?
Oh, that's a hard one to answer. I don't know.
Where are we going with that? I mean, you're right there on campus.
I I don't know. My gut says no, but I haven't heard anything officially, so I don't know.
You can't take the Gator.
You know what? We will have Gator football no matter what.
Yeah.
The Gators are everywhere. We've got loyal fans, but whether they're on the field or not, I don't know.
Well, thank you so much for joining me again, Lori Pennington-Gray, PhD from the University of Florida. She's done tons of research. You can find her works just by Googling her name online. She just wrote a dynamic piece for the New York Times that I immediately picked up and said, I need to be her new best friend after I read that. And so go out, look at what she's done. She's done just a dynamic job researching the tourism crisis, what we can expect, the trends. And it's been so great talking to you today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay,
Appreciate it.
see you guys later.